Prototype is dumb, and I don't think I'm blowing anyone's mind by saying that, but I felt the need to throw it out there. I don't mean that with any sort of hostility. In fact, I quite enjoyed my time with the game, but I find it very hard to take seriously. The most immediately obvious of Prototype's problems is its story. It makes very little sense. For how much time this game dedicates to cutscenes, it manages to convey surprisingly little. By the time I finished with the story missions, I had only the vaguest understanding of the game's events and lore, and I hardly think I'm entirely to blame for that. Characters will speak of plot-relevant events under the assumption that the player knows what they are, when all we've been given previously is a few vague hints about them. Actually, that's the perfect word for this game's story. Vague. It's vague about everything, from past events to character motivations, and while vagueness and controlled quantities can serve to tell some intriguing mysteries, being too vague just results in confusion. This might all be fine and dandy if the characters were at least something, but they're not. I have no inkling as to who any of these people are. Take, for example, the main guy, Alex Mercer. Why did he unleash the virus at Penn Station, and why was he investigating whatever he was investigating? His motive throughout the game seems to be revenge and seeking answers, but what answers did he get, really? That he did the bad thing and this virus isn't new? And did any of the people he killed really hold enough responsibility for this event to classify the taking of their lives as revenge? Also, what the fuck was anything about Elizabeth Green? She shows up and we find out she was a past test subject or something, absorb her, find out little new information if any, and move on. And the point was... The short version is, nothing about the story or characters kept me engaged with this game. Even when they tried to incorporate story elements into the game with this web of intrigue thing, I just couldn't get into it. How it works is there's some important people roaming around the city, and if you absorb them, you get yet another vague cutscene that tells you very little. Repeat over 100 times and you might come out of it with a slightly better understanding of the game's story than your average player. It's essentially one of the game's set of collectibles, but instead of rewarding you with experience or something useful in-game, it's entirely optional story content that fails to interest. Here's a newsflash. Collecting things in this game is not fun. The game was built around quick movement and gratifying combat, and in a game where my favorite activity is propelling giant flesh spikes out of the ground to impale any nearby person, the last thing I want to do is run around the city looking for a random blue orb. At least with the web targets, I can appreciate the collecting being woven into the gameplay by requiring the player to absorb the targets like they would an enemy. But 200 arbitrary blue orbs? That's just tedious. It was tedious in Infamous, it was tedious in Saints Row 4, it's tedious here. And what do these orbs reward you with? Experience points. The problem here is twofold. 1. Experience points are pathetically easy to come across and grind up, and there are much more fun ways to gather them, such as blowing shit up. If I'm feeling lacking in the experience point department, I'll try the latter long before I seriously consider going on a collectathon. But more importantly here is what the experience points are used for. Upgrades. My gripe with Prototype's upgrade system is that a lot of it seems unnecessary. There are a few good upgrades here and there that give a significant change in gameplay, like the Whip Fist, adding very new weapons to Mercer's arsenal and giving the player more options to approach any given situation. Then you have upgrades like the incremental health upgrades, or the useless combo attacks with button combinations that I'm never going to memorize, and just so much other stuff I can't even remember ever using or feeling like I needed to use. It feels cluttered, saturated with junk, and could easily have been boiled down to a few essentials. But hey, I guess we needed something to buy with the butt-ton of experience we get awarded by everything. But once you get past all that nonsense, what you're left with is a fun sandbox with lots of cool, gory superpowers and various other ways to kill shit en masse, and all of that is what makes Prototype worth playing. Combat is relatively simple. Pick your melee weapon of choice, click button at enemies, kill enemies. The simplicity of these actions is made replayable by the variety of weapons available, each with their own playstyle. You can go with the simple claws to quickly cut down people to ribbons, massive fists to bang into the ground and send out shockwaves, this giant armed sword thing that deals insane damage, you get the idea. There's plenty of fast movement options allowing you to dodge around enemies or run away with relative ease. You can dash, glide, lock onto enemies, the culmination of mastering all of this making you feel pretty badass. There's a decent variety of enemies that ensures combat never gets too stale. There are infected units, basically zombies, which are really just pushovers, fun to kill in mass Dynasty Warrior style, and useful for testing out new abilities on. Hunters are fast and like to chase you, and their attacks can lock you in a combo, but they're just the right level of challenge when you're thinking infected are too easy. There's also a bunch of military units that range from fodder to trying to explode you, and successfully annihilating military units while under heavy fire provides a satisfying challenge. Both sides have their own bases which correlate to their control over the map, bases which can be destroyed. The task of destroying these buildings usually comes down to hijacking a military vehicle and firing repeatedly at it. These base takedowns are cool in concept, but in execution the strategy is always, and I mean always, the same, making them mature after the first few. Speaking of which, military vehicles are a thing, and they're pretty cool. There are tanks you can hijack and blow shit up with, or you could just run over pedestrians, all of which is absurdly fun. But then there's the helicopters. The helicopters are one of my favorite parts of the game, despite being easily exploitable. The mere ability to dropkick a helicopter out of the sky is itself gratifying, but taking it further and being able to hijack a helicopter mid-air is just insane, becoming even more ridiculous and awesome when you get into a dogfight, jumping from one helicopter to the next as you fire at other helicopters and get fired at. Where the helicopters get exploitable, however, is when you go to destroy buildings. Whether you're attacking an infected building or a military base, it's not that hard to just fly up high enough for enemies to not be able to hit you while raining hell down upon them, and then repeat ad nauseum until either all buildings are destroyed or you get bored, with little effort on your part. True, the military can send other helicopters after you, but they're easily disposed of, and if they manage to damage you too much, you can always abandon yours and leap onto another quite easily. This is what I meant when I said the strategy was always the same. Sure, you could try it with a tank, but that's not as efficient or easy as a helicopter, so why bother? The reward's the same either way, just some more experience points, so might as well get it done quickly. But despite that, Prototype is still fun. Even if you can just fly around with a helicopter and win everything, jumping out of it and into a crowd of zombies, cutting them up, and running up a building still makes it all worth it. The base bloody combat is the heart of Prototype, and makes it worth tolerating the incomprehensible plotline, the exploitable or unnecessary features. Prototype's fun is in being a mindless sandbox superpower murder simulator, and I am okay with that. Of those types of games, though, it wouldn't be my first recommendation. When it comes to sandbox murder simulators, I'd go for Saints Row 2, for having plenty of sandbox murder and actually good story, while lacking tacked-on or exploitable features. For sandbox superpower simulators, well, Saints Row 4, for its sheer variety of powers being more than just Melee 1, Melee 2, so on. When you want those in a package, however, and when you're wanting a bit more gratuitous blood and gore, that's when you finally pop in Prototype.